So, yeah, not looking good if you take that into consideration, along with all the crazy posts by Trump.
Have you considered false flag?
I saw that. Yeah. I'd love to hear it from you. I haven't had anyone give me that take yet.
Well, so the drones came out of potentially either out of Iraq or out of Yemen. Who constructed a secret base in Iraq that was used in the attack on Iran?
Two bases.
Yeah. So
found out today it was actually two bases.
I think it starts with the letter I. Israel. Yeah, Israel. And why would Israel do that? So if what I've been hearing in terms of Russian-Chinese diplomatic efforts via Pakistan to create this new security architecture in the Gulf means that Saudis and Qataris will be principal ones involved with that. So one way to try to keep them from aligning, essentially, with Iran is to launch attacks which they're led to believe are from Iran. Well, again, Iran is not going to start this. And Iran is not going to start attacking Saudi Arabia and Qatar and even the UAE right now on its own, because they're waiting. They're keeping their powder dry because they've got the diplomatic initiative. They're not going to surrender that. They don't need to. It's the United States that's posting threatening messages. Iran is always saying, "Hey, if we're attacked, we're going to retaliate." It's that simple. So I wouldn't rule out that this was an attempt to create the impression that Iran is attacking Saudi Arabia in order to make the Saudis angry with the Iranians so that they don't go forward with this deal that the Chinese and Russians are pushing. That's one other aspect to consider.
Yeah, and look, they have a history of conducting false flag attacks.
Yeah. You think?
I think they conducted a few false flag attacks, by the way, in this. Yeah. They might have conducted a few false flag attacks in this war. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, remember,
by the way,
I was just saying, remember the attacks on Turkey? Or Turkey,
Azerbaijan? No. Turkey, Cyprus. Was there one in Azerbaijan? Yeah, there was something between Iran and Azerbaijan as well.
Yeah. So that you can't rule Israel out trying to conduct these operations to create the impression that it's Iran when it's not. Because, Iran, look, they've made it very clear. If attacked, if these escalate, they are going to retaliate and retaliate en masse. And, I think this is the stupidest thing that Trump and Bibi Netanyahu could ever want to do. Instead of trying to find a graceful exit and bring an end to this, they're going to expand it. And I think the West is going to suffer terribly from this, much more so than Iran.
Yeah. And if you consider that, by the way, you're talking about the Israeli base in Iraq. Today, there was a New York Times story. I'll read out my summary from my team. Turns out there wasn't one secret Israeli base in Iraq, but two. The New York Times is reporting a second covert base in Iraq's Western Desert. Senior Iraqi regional officials confirming that to the Wall Street Journal, cracked open last week. At least one had been quietly running since late 2024, sitting inside Iraqi territory without Baghdad knowing. And at least one was used during the 12-day war against Iran last June. The only reason any of this surfaced is the Bedouin Shepherd. So, yeah. That's one scenario. And another
you definitely have to consider that.
I think so. I agree. So if it is a false flag attack, obviously the intention is pretty clear. It's Israel trying to trigger war again and trying to turn. There's reports that the US is trying to convince, or was trying to convince, along with the Israelis, the UAE to directly join a conflict with Iran. And I really worry that the UAE is being played here. That's my concern. But we'll see.
If there's a betting market on that, go put all your money down on that, because you'll walk away a wealthy man. I mean, you already may be a wealthy man, but hey, more the merrier. No, I guarantee you that's what's going on.
Yeah. But I in the early days of the war, I've said this a few times, something very fascinating happened. There was a Channel 12 report that the UAE struck the desalination plant in Iran. We posted it, and then the Israelis, the UAE immediately said, look, we didn't do it. And what is going on? And I had conversations with them. And there was a lot of concern they were being dragged into the war directly. And there's a lot of mystery. Even though they're working with Israel, I think people don't understand there isn't that level of trust. Now, I could be wrong. For Netanyahu to visit here, I could be wrong. But then again, Netanyahu then threw UAE under the bus and announced his visit. Despite, by the way, a report came out today, the UAE explicitly asked him not to share that he visited the UAE, not surprisingly. And he still shared it anyway for domestic political gains. So yeah, false flag. Now, if it is Iran, so we go with the other theory. If it is Iran, would you agree with my thoughts? This would be a warning to the US and Israel as we get indications they might strike again. This is Iran trying to deter that by warning that. Similar to what we saw with the Operation Freedom. When that happened, Iran went all out to make it very clear, draw the line very clearly. And could this be Iran indicating that this time their approach to warfare will be different to what we saw previously?
No, actually, I don't think it'll be an approach that it'll be different. It'll be more intense.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
if you want to say that that's different, yeah, it'll be different in that regard. Much more intense, and they will, again. It depends upon the targets that the West is going to hit. Now, the notion that they have to sit down and figure out what they're going to do—that's nonsense. That the attack package has been ready for 5 weeks since the ceasefire. They already had those.
Maybe there's a few packages. I want to decide which one.
No, they already know they already know the targets they want to hit. That's already factored in. Now the unknown is, will Saudi Arabia and Qatar, next Kuwait, continue to allow the United States to use their airspace and any other bases that are left? And that could end up being a holdup or preventative, prevent the United States from carrying out a new attack, because if their air operation, their air operations require the ability to conduct aerial resupply or aerial refueling over Saudi Arabia and Qatar. But Saudi Arabia in particular, they've got to be able to carry out those refueling operations. And at Prince Saud Air Base and just outside of Riyadh, they do have a number of U.S. KC-135s, the air refuelers. That's where they're based.
Do you think they can? Do you think they can go back to war if they don't have access to these bases in airspace, or that would make it pretty much impossible?
Yeah, it'd make it very well, not impossible, but really problematic and very risky.
And much harder to be able to conduct it to the same ferocity as the first phase.
Yeah, they can't. I mean, the reality is, without the cooperation of the Saudis and Qataris, so they'd be left to go into the Yemenis, but they still, you still got to fly over from Israel.
Oh, there's a report. There's a report that Yemen struck down a U.S. Reaper today as well.
Yeah.
You saw that?
Well, they've gotten good at that. Remember they knocked down. Let's see, they knocked down like 28 during the entirety of So first of Operation Prosperity Guardian, they were knocking down one a month. So that started in December of 2023. So you got 12, 2024, and then you had 12, and then you had 14 more, January, February, March. So 15, let's say they had 15 that downed, and then they downed it. So 22 total during that entire Operation Prosperity Guardian / Rough Rider. So, they've gotten pretty, the Houthis know how to do that. They're pretty good at it.
Oil prices are not looking good. Just went up to over 107.
Yeah.
Spiked up 105.
Yeah, it should have been going up long before now. I mean, it's been artificially suppressed.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they're doing it. I think part of it's been, again, the release in the United States of strategic oil reserves that have kept gasoline prices down. But that's good. That's going to end this week, I think, because Trump is unwilling to walk away, and because he's unwilling to walk away, the odds of a renewed war are extremely high.
Yeah. We have, just give you a bit of an update. Earlier today, Israel and the US are raising their alert level amid the possibility of renewed strikes. That's according to Khan News. Tensions are increasing as discussions continue over whether to resume coordinated military action. According to an Israeli official, if Trump approves renewed attacks, the strikes will be carried out jointly by both militaries. The plan under discussion reportedly includes targeting Iran's national energy infrastructure. A limited cabinet meeting is expected tonight in Israel as security concerns intensify. So that came in.
Go ahead. Sorry.
By Khan News. Now go ahead. What's the question?
Well, no, I was just going to note, if they go after Iran's power plant, that national electrical system, Iran is a big, complex country, so there's not just one node that you knock out and they're in trouble. And that same doesn't apply to Israel. Israel's a small country, very easy to disrupt and destroy its power grid, its power system, and the same applies to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates. So, if the United States and Israel go down that route, just stand by. It's going to be lights out in those other countries.
Very stupid decision.
Yeah.
And I've said it a few times today. If it happens, I think I said it to you as well. It's Trump deciding to just throw away the Gulf and his relationship with the Gulf. So it's very clear. Trump posted, as you know, a whole bunch of things. Lisa, can you put that post of the map of Iran just now? Right. Meanwhile, for Iran, the clock, he said also earlier today, for Iran, the clock is ticking and they better get moving fast, or there won't be anything left for them. Time is of essence. So that was earlier. Because this is his base reading all this. And when he says things like this, he's kind of putting himself in a corner where he's making it harder and harder for himself to walk away. That's what really worries me.
Yeah, and let's understand, it's actually, Trump's not writing these. Trump is we got some insight the other day through a New York Times piece, or maybe it was Wall Street Journal. I don't recall precisely which one, but there's a young woman named Harp. And so she drafts these things up, and then they submit them to Trump for approval, and then he signs off on them, and then they release them. So this is you've got people who really aren't very skilled, very smart, very experienced, writing up the stupidity, and then Trump puts it out, and he really doesn't have a context. He doesn't have a full grasp of the intelligence, and it's just. They propagandize like one of the posts from about an hour ago. Empty oil tankers are sailing to the U.S. to load up on oil, and he ignores the fact that actually the United States doesn't have that much oil to sell. We've actually got some limited amounts, and again, it's he's touting the Space Force, which is basically the main means of destroying satellites. And the images he shows a nuclear bomb going off, and he shows attacks on basically Russian and Chinese satellites. That's what he's showing. And he shows himself pushing the red button. This is, again, people are now feeding this to his ego. And then, they got one of him walking on water. It's just,
There's another one of him saying the calm before the storm or something with warships behind him. Ironically, those warships had Iranian flags. I don't know if that was intentional. But it's really hard to understand. But do you agree with my concern is that the more he does this, the more he makes it harder for himself to walk away, because his base is like, hey, you were posting just a few days ago and telling the media that if they don't give you a better deal, you're going to attack them harder. Yeah. And now you're walking away. Whereas if he didn't use that rhetoric consistently, especially today, then walking away would be more feasible, at least in the eyes of his MAGA base.
Well, I guess I don't necessarily accept the assumption that he wants to walk away. I think he is, again, a puppet. He is a victim of the Zionist lobby. And if he was left alone just to make his own decision, I think he would turn away from this and he'd move on to something else. But the lies he's being told about Iran, and the fact that it's being presented that you don't have any choice. If you don't do this, Iran's going to get the bomb, and you're making greater strides than any president ever has. And the Iranians, they only got enough oil and money to last for a day or two. They're on the ropes, all of that, and he just happily goes along with it, not exercising any kind of critical thinking skill, and certainly not voicing any kind of vision of what he wants for the Persian Gulf and Iran, other than the death of Iran.
So there's something came out on Fars News. Just on last question, I think if hypothetically he does want to walk away, or if it was at least an option, let's say he had an option, either escalate or I walk away, that option becomes harder to implement if he keeps talking like this. Fars News put out a report this morning. They're comparing US demands versus Iranian demands. So they listed the American demands as such, according to Fars News. No compensation for war damages, understood. Transfer of Iran's 400 kilograms of enriched uranium to the US. Obviously, that's Iran wants to transfer it to Russia, which is fine. Iran to maintain just a single nuclear facility in the entire country. That's difficult to achieve, but might seem like a concession on the American side compared to the early days of total surrender. No release of Iran's frozen assets. Well, that's a red line for Iran. They want their frozen assets. And lastly, U.S. demand a ceasefire conditional on the success of the talks between U.S. and Iran. The Iranian demands, according to Fast News, one, ceasefire on all fronts, lifting of all sanctions on Iran, release of all frozen assets, reparations, and recognition of sovereignty of the Strait of Hormuz. Same position we've discussed time and time again. Yeah. One thing is clear, though, that they're very far apart. I know we've said this a lot, so maybe I'll add this. They're still very far apart. That hasn't changed.
Right. It's an unbridgeable gulf. The only thing that will bring the United States around is when the economic crisis becomes so deep and the need to get a normality restored to the Strait of Hormuz becomes so great that then Trump will blink and they'll begin making the concessions they need to make. But by then, frankly, it's going to be too late. The damage to the global economy is done. It's now baked in. And the combination, the biggest thing that really ought to worry people is the loss of fertilizer, the global loss of fertilizer, upwards of a third, 1/3 of a percent, which means there's going to be less land put into productive activities like growing crops, and there will be fewer crops to harvest, which means, less rice, less corn, less wheat, and then people wanting to get fed, they're going to face skyrocketing prices with those commodities, and they're going to experience shortages, just like the shortages with oil are now showing up.
Yeah, and a guest told me that one of the deals that Trump reached in China was for China to buy more American soybeans. Well, the problem now is that with the shortage with fertilizers, especially if this continues, the farmers don't even have enough fertilizers to be able to produce the soybeans that China apparently wants to buy from the US based on the deal. So it's just everything's just not going in his favor across all fronts.
Well, in this deal, China didn't say, yeah, we're going to buy 25 million bushels. They didn't say anything like that at all.
Yeah, they said everything's preliminary.
They just expressed, we're willing to consider buying some of your soybeans, provided all these other areas of concern that we've raised are taken care of. But, we're able to buy all the soybeans we need right now from Brazil. It's the U.S. farmer that needs the Chinese purchase. China doesn't need it. China was doing it in the past basically to help the United States out. And I think they're now in a very different mindset. They don't want to help the United States at all, other than telling the United States, lift your blockade, get the hell out of the Middle East.
Talking about China, let me read this out for you. Trump's visit to Beijing was a symbol of declining American power. That's according to analysis by The Atlantic. Wow. Okay. That's The Atlantic. Trump's visit to Beijing was a symbol of declining American power, with China merely entertaining the president without offering any real concessions. I'll read out a quote from the article. Franklin Foer writes that despite lavish protocols and ceremonies, the Xi-Trump meeting yielded no significant political or economic achievements for Washington.
Right.
The article states, quote, when America extends its hand, no one rushes to grasp it anymore. And when it threatens, no one feels fear anymore. Xi not only refrained from presenting a specific plan to end the Iran war, but also refused to sign a major trade agreement or provide guarantees on U.S. access to rare earth minerals. Wow. Yeah. That's coming from The Atlantic. I'll read this quote again. It's an important one. When America extends its hand, no one rushes to grasp it anymore. And when it threatens, no one feels fear anymore. Wow.
Yeah. The United States has done this to itself. You can only be a bully so long before somebody steps up to punch you back in the nose and put you in your place. And the United States tried to bully China. And China, instead of getting mad and throwing a temper tantrum, they just said, okay, we don't need to buy soybeans from the United States. They got plenty in Brazil. We'll buy it from Brazil. And in fact, when we make that transfer, it's going to be with our respective currencies. So when they stop buying soybeans in US dollars, that means the demand for dollar goes down. Well, and there's this enormous supply of dollars out there. So its value of the US dollar is going down, which over the long term, you could argue would make American products cheaper, except many of those products, particularly in the military realm that we want to produce, we cannot produce because we don't have the rare earth minerals, which China controls. And China was quite content, said, okay, the United States wants to be mad and be a bully, fine, but we'll just ignore them.
Another piece of development that kind of highlights the multipolar world that we're heading into. Canada's deepening Arctic defense cooperation with Nordic countries as concerns grow over relying too heavily on the US amid Trump's negative comments about Greenland and Canada. So that's according to Reuters. Ottawa is expanding military ties with Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland, while helping Greenland build a local force modeled on Canada's Arctic Rangers, which maintain a permanent presence in remote Arctic communities. Prime Minister Carney says Canada still values NORAD, but wants stronger partnerships among middle powers, while officials cite rising concerns over Arctic security and Russian activity. Mm-hmm. So now you've got Canada diversifying, indications of it diversifying away from the US. Same as what we're seeing in the Gulf. It's moving really quickly, so quickly under this administration. We've got this report from Canada. We've got Europe talking about building a European army. Well, it's called NATO, but building another European army. And then you've got the Gulf talking about building an alliance there or diversifying to Turkey and Pakistan.
Yeah, I don't know what military options the folks in Europe actually think they have. They do not have adequate manpower. We know that. Their industrial base has been stripped bare. And so they're not in a position where they can just ramp up production of, guns, tanks, bombs, etc. So, a lot of this is posturing. This trying to pretend that they've got some power and that trying to scare Iran. And I don't think Iran is being frightened at all by this.
I don't think Europe's more trying to cause deterrence against Russia, not to avoid Russia attacking them, which, by the way, I'm going to ask you a few questions on later. Some reports came in that you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But more about kind of showing strength and unity, really. But I know short term they can't do much, but let's not forget the Europe 20 years ago. That can happen again in 20 years if they fix their approach to their interests, and especially when it comes to energy, and more importantly, just figure out how Brussels works to make it more efficient, less bickering and red tape. If they improve these processes, I know they don't have a lot of natural resources, but they're pretty advanced economies. They've got the tech sector has potential, even though they screwed the hell out of it over the last couple of decades. Yeah. I just think I'm hoping, again, I could be disappointed again for another 20 years, that Europe reemerges with at least a bit more influence in the world. If we're talking about a multipolar world, I'd like one of those poles to be Europe, with different foreign policy approach, no longer looking at Russia as an enemy. I think that's important as well.
So what would be the foundation of that power? Is it economic in terms of what does Europe produce that the rest of the world needs? Answer is not much.
But that's what they have to pick up. They have to reindustrialize. When I'm talking about the US, it's a long-term thing. I'm not saying they're able to do it, but Germany was a manufacturing hub not long ago, so they were there. So it's about getting back to that position, but it involves reevaluating. Like, for example, if they reevaluate their relationship with Russia post-Ukraine war and somehow improve it, again, I know it sounds unimaginable now, but unimaginable sometimes becomes reality, improve it, then that helps them on the energy front. And they're pretty good when it comes to technology. They've got a lot of talent in the country that has really been drained to the US and other countries. So educational industry is not bad. Financial sector is good. So I just hope they can build it up again. That's coming from someone that lived in Europe for many years. So, and I love the culture there.
But that's where we need to step back and take a look and say, okay, what are they really doing? They are becoming more threatening of Russia. They've expanded their production of drones and that are being used to attack Russia. And Russia, I don't know if you've ever interviewed Ambassador Polyansky, who used to be the number 2 guy at the UN ambassador, Russia's UN mission. But Ambassador Polyansky is now over in Switzerland. And he was on Danny Davis's podcast yesterday or Friday. And
a couple of days ago.
Yeah, he's been very direct that, hey, it's highly likely that Russia is going to have to launch attacks in Europe in order to defend itself. And it's important to understand that Polyansky doesn't have the kind of political stature like Lavrov, where Lavrov could say something that he may not have coordinated with Putin, but it would still garner respect. No, he doesn't have that clout. So, I mean, when Polyansky's saying this, he's basically saying it with the blessing of Lavrov and Putin. That's what's important to understand. So it wasn't just he doesn't carry the weight. We're on his own. He could just say this. He's a cautious. I don't want to say it. He's a cautious diplomat. He's a true professional, but he's also not yet of the stature that he could go off and be saying these things just on his own. So when he said that, my ears perked up and went, "Holy smokes!"
It's in line with what Karaganov also said.
Yeah, Karaganov.
Karaganov also said as well 3 days ago.
Yeah, when Karaganov says that more and more Russian elites are taking that position, and look candidly, I don't blame them. I understand, and Europe is playing with fire, as in terms of backing Zelensky in this and enabling these different drone attacks. So, so what we're actually moving towards that the risk of conflict with Europe, let's call it what it is, war. A war with Europe is growing, not diminishing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And the Europeans, in their own idiocy, are aiding and abetting that because they don't think there's going to be any consequences. I was just, at this shooting event I was at today, where I was a supervising safety officer. There was a business out of the Netherlands, and they do virtual reality training systems that you can train special forces for attacking targets and such. And I got conversing with him, and the Europeans have really been brainwashed into believing that, oh man, Russia's losing this war. Russia's losing personnel right and left. Russia can't sustain it. This is a stalemate. And so I told him, I said, okay, you're aware, aren't you, that since January of 2025, every month there's been a public body exchange of dead Russian soldiers for dead Ukrainian soldiers. And the average number of dead Ukrainians returned to Ukraine is 37 to 1. Now, I said, some would argue that have argued that there's a stalemate between Russia and Ukraine. Then when you point out this disparity, they'll then come back and say, well, that's just because Russia's advancing too fast. They don't have time to recover the bodies. Yeah, so if they're advancing too fast, that means it's not a stalemate. Because a stalemate means you don't have any place to move. It's just the opposite. It's the opposite of a stalemate. It's a rout. It's a retreat.
And Sergei Karaganov also said, sorry, what he said about 10 days ago, he warned that Ukraine war could escalate. So explicitly linking he linked the Ukraine war to the Iran war as part of a broader Western orchestrated world war, he said, to destabilize Eurasia. He advised stronger Russian escalation, including sharper nuclear deterrence, doctrinal revisions, and strikes on the West, not just Ukraine, to win decisively, talking about, similar to the gentleman you mentioned, the ambassador, talking about manufacturing facilities and warehouses within NATO territory that is used in the Ukraine war. But if you're going to put that in the, I was talking about Europe, put that in the broader picture, along with what we're seeing in Iran, then all of it coming together. My last guest, a really good guy, you might know him. His name was really cool guy. First time he's on the show, I'll make him a regular. Brandon Weikart, you know him? He was on
I know of him.
Yeah, he's a nice guy, smart guy,
yeah.
And he's telling me, Mario, if you put all these pieces together, he would call it already the beginning of a world war, not in the sense of World War I, World War II, but we are having a regional war in the Middle East.
Right.
We are having, now, and look what Trump did in Taiwan. He just literally said he was out of nowhere. We're talking about him going to China, coming back with concessions on the Chinese side. Well, he came back and now talking about potentially freezing the assets, going over to Taiwan and say something along the lines that Taiwan should not use American alliance to declare independence, something along those lines. I can't remember the exact quote,
right?
But a lot of people interpreted that as even Lindsey Graham talking about it, like he's saying, if the president, obviously Lindsey Graham wants to support Taiwan, very hawkish, but he's saying if the president doesn't want to supply the weapons, that's up to the president. And then he talks about how the US should still support Taiwan. But Lindsey Graham started speaking about it, trying to defend the statements by Trump. So you've got a war in Europe that's escalating, as we've just said. The Iran war that could return and could become even more aggressive. And you've got a trip by Trump to China that led to potentially the beginning of a change of American policy towards Taiwan. We'll see the next administration. So one can argue that this is, did this happen? Saudi? Okay, yeah, so just I think this is the same report. Okay, that's the same report as earlier about the Saudi drones, the 3 drones in Saudi, also from Iraq, by the way, funny enough, just to highlight. But yeah, the point I wanted to make is this could be the opportune moment for, if we're talking about Russia escalating in Ukraine war, this could be the right time. Ukraine's going to run lower on munitions because of what's been needed in Iran. The US is stuck in a quagmire in Iran, in a catastrophic strategic mistake. And China's really not supporting the US in any way, not offering him any off-ramp. If anything, it's causing Trump issues back there by not conceding on anything. So that could be a pretty good time for Putin.
Well, again, let's also make the point, and this was driven home to me by my son the other day, because he came in and said, well, why isn't China laying off on Taiwan? And I said, I said, stop. I said, do you understand that in 1972, when Richard Nixon went to China and met with Mao Zedong, and then Gerald Ford said it in concrete, that the United States policy was to recognize Taiwan is part of China. Taiwan is not an independent state. And the U.S. policy until recently was to support China's view that Taiwan is a part of China and it's not an independent state. That only became really the mantra in Washington of late to counter that, to suggest that Taiwan is independent, should be independent, that we must support Taiwan's independence, etc., was once Taiwan became the base for NVIDIA and making all these computer chips that the United States so desperately needs. So for Trump to finally acknowledge again that Taiwan is China's, it belongs to China. It's part of Chinese territory in the same way that the Hawaiian Islands are part of the United States.
Yeah. He said, so what he said exactly, he said he does not, what Trump said, I'm not looking to have somebody go independent, talking about Taiwan declaring independence. But I think it's a bigger indicator of how that meeting went. Trump went there looking for concessions, ended up by the looks of it, giving up concessions.
Right.
Another piece of information that came in when it comes to the Gulf, Egypt is reportedly offering to deploy in Amun air defense battery in the UAE to help with the air defense systems. And that goes to the point that I think the UAE is really diversifying their air defenses. They have South Korea, they have Israeli, they have obviously American, and now they're talking about using an Egyptian one, which I don't think is going to be that capable.
And all of those are worthless. They might as well put people out there with slingshots.
They can't all be worthless. I'm a bigger believer in
wait. Why do you say they can't all be worthless? Or can you show me, give me an example where they have stopped ballistic missiles, particularly hypersonic ballistic missiles? Hell, they can't even stop drones. look, we had it in Qatar, and was it in Saudi Arabia? They had those two radar systems that each were $1 billion plus to cost, and we put Patriot missile batteries there. We put THAAD missile batteries there, and they were destroyed by drones. So that's why I say they're useless. They're worthless. They are, the only thing they're good for is making the U.S. Lockheed Martin, who builds them, and its shareholders much wealthier.
No, I think that what could have happened as well in that radar, they could have overwhelmed it with a barrage of missiles and drones.
But that's the point.
Air defense systems.
So that's the point. Air defense either defends against aerial attack, or it doesn't.
But I think
that's exactly the point. It can be overwhelmed. You've got to start. So if you're going to make an effective air defense like the Russians actually, you still get a few leakages through, but nothing like what happened to Qatar. And Qatar has state-of-the-art systems.
But there's Russian air defense systems in Iran, and Iran got struck pretty hard as well.
No, there's no evidence of a Russian. There was one S-300 or S-400 down around the one nuclear power plant. And actually, that didn't get hit. Bashir.
Bashir.
No, it's Bashir.
Bashir was struck. They struck a couple of times next to it, no?
No, they struck nearby, but they didn't strike the plant itself, which was protected.
Oh.
Now, what does Iran have now? We'll find out. Yeah, because I was not making the case that, Iran had very effective air defense. No, it didn't. It did not either. But the point is
the domestic one as well.
That if UAE is again, look at that. UAE got an Iron Dome. And then what happened to Fujairah? Yeah. What happened? It got hit, and they failed to prevent it from.
I just don't have. The air defenses are not good for drones. I think that's pretty clear. I think all of them are not designed for drones.
And they're certainly not good for ballistic missiles, that's what Iran's firing. They're firing short range, intermediate range, and full range ballistic missiles at targets in Saudi Arabia, or they did in Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain. UAE, Israel, Jordan.
The UAE was attacked the most, including Israel. The damage was very limited. Well, there was a drone debris in 2 hotels. There was Al Dhafra Air Base, which was being used again not long afterwards. And you've got the Fujairah got struck. The airport got struck once with a drone. Most of the strikes were drone, even though they had hundreds of missiles fired at them.
Yeah.
Maybe they should get some credit.
Well, how do we know they had that many? Did Iran say they fired that many missiles?
Oh, they said they intercepted that many. So yeah, if you want to doubt that, then it's different.
Or is it the UAE? They fired all these missiles at it. Look, we've seen this over and over in Ukraine, where Ukraine goes, we shot down 90% of the missiles that were fired at us. Just you do the numbers that were launched, and then you do the number of actual Patriot missiles that are there. Ukraine started off, at most they had 1,000, which means they could stop 500 Russian missiles or drones. Well, Russia just fired more than 1,600 the other night. Right there, that should have wiped out any. So that's what I'm saying. There's so much hype attached to this, and it's meaningless. Go ahead, Egypt. Yeah, Egypt's known for its great air defense.
I didn't defend the Egyptian one. I wouldn't dare do that. By the way, do you know, before I go to the updates on Israel, did you see the barrage that happened today in Moscow by Ukraine? I haven't read much about it. I just looked quick.
Yeah.
Was it significant, and what was it?
It was ineffective. They launched a huge barrage, and most of over 90% of the missiles were taken down, and you can see that by the video images out of Moscow. What was struck were some apartment buildings, some civilian targets, and all that means is Kiev is going to take a bigger beating tomorrow. So Russia's ramping up the pressure, but they go for the Ukrainians go for the propaganda victory, but it doesn't change the military situation, which is Ukraine advancing and taking territory? No. Is Ukraine building up its army because so many Ukrainians are rushing to join? No. Does Ukraine have growing supplies of artillery, cruise missiles, HIMARS, Patriot? No. The answer is no. So they're quote winning. So this is the Russian spring offensives are they get off to a bit of a slow start, but then they keep gathering momentum. So you're seeing more desperation on the part of Ukraine.
One last quick question on Ukraine before we get into Israel. Do you think Putin made a mistake invading Ukraine? Do you think the whole strategy, the whole plan, the whole military campaign was a mistake in hindsight?
No. I mean, they had to, because if they had not, Ukraine was going to launch the attack, and they would have probably had more involvement from NATO. So no, Russia's preemptive. Russia's initial strategy worked. Remember, the goal was to put enough military pressure to get the Ukrainian government to the negotiating table, which they did, and to get them to have an agreement, which they reached. And then in response to that agreement, Russia started withdrawing forces from in and around Kiev and the area up north. And then under pressure from the United States and Great Britain, basically Zelensky was bought off to say, no, hell no, we're not going to do that. And that's when the war changed. So Russia's initial calculation, I think, was right. You and I were sitting there with Lavrov when he pulled out the paper and said, look, the agreement that was brought to the table was brought by Ukraine. We accepted it. He said, we largely accepted that. So I don't think Lavrov was lying when he told us that. He was being, I think, pretty straightforward.
No, I believe that. I think the deal in Istanbul, I do think that. So I blame Ukraine and NATO on expanding. That played a big role in this war. And Ukraine for not accepting the deal in Istanbul from all the information we've heard, which is pretty public information now. On the Putin side, I still don't, I think you know my position. I don't know what the solution would have been to NATO expansion, but definitely not a fan of the invasion at all. But that's generally my stance as a person that's anti-war. On the Israeli side, the economy shrank by 3.3% in the first quarter of 2026 due to the war. That's according to Channel 12. Trump and Netanyahu spoke, as we know, and I mentioned earlier. The report about another base in Iraq, and that's a pretty significant thing. Israel's not known to have bases in the region. And that should be like, that would have been, if that was before this war, you would have heard an outcry from the Gulf.
Right.
An Israeli base on their doorstep in Iraq, 2 bases. Imagine, because they've always looked at Israel. They're not a threat. They're far away all the way there. They're not going to be a threat. Now they've got 2 bases at our doorsteps. So that would have been very significant before this war. But now we're distracted in this war. That things that would have been like a strike in Qatar by Israel, that was like a massive thing. Everyone's talking about it. I remember when I did a show, that was a massive shock to me. And now we're in a position where these things are just like, that's the new world we live in.
Yeah, again, Israel's position is not growing stronger; it's growing weaker. And that was actually had a conversation with our friend Nima, our mutual friend Nima, yesterday, because he'd been approached by this character, and I don't know, have you had this Jiang Xuanqin, whatever his name, this Chinese character on your show?
He was on. Yeah, I didn't publish it. He went viral recently. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Professor Jiang. He was on my show a while ago. I didn't publish it. He was on my show.
Good that you didn't publish it. I think the guy is a fraud. He's been used as an intel asset in my view, and he was talking about the Greater Israel Project that Israel's going to take from the river to the sea, from Nile to the Euphrates, and take Turkey and take Syria. I mean, the guy is he's a loon. He's a loon. Yeah, he's an absolute loon, and the fact that he's even given any voice to push that kind of nonsense that is completely devoid of reality. Look, this what is really going on behind the scenes is China and Russia are working with Turkey, Saudis, Qataris, and the Iranians to try to form a new, almost let's call it an Islamic version of NATO that will be there to enforce security for that region, basically standing against Israel. And the notion that Israel's got the military strength to go up against all of them, that's ridiculous. Hell, Israel can't handle Hamas. Yeah, it's good at killing civilians. Let's give it. That's what it's good at. But killing civilians does not actually bring you political victory.
I had an interview today with someone from Project 8200, which is the kind of the Signet equivalent of Mossad, and he's very critical of Israeli foreign policy. He was in Project 8200. I think it's not called Project 8200.
Unit 8200.
Yeah, Unit 8200. And he kind of went through this. He's like, Mario, Israel is great from an intelligence perspective, great at assassinations more than anything, and is great at tactical successes, but strategic failures. That was his way of framing it, which is kind of in line with what you're saying. And he used the Hezbollah pager attacks. So tactically, incredible success, probably the most successful operation by any intelligence body. Strategically, look at Hezbollah today.
Yeah. Well, again, so how do you define success? Did we killed and maimed a lot of people, including a lot of civilians?
Tactically, yes. Tactically, that's how they would look at it. So injured or killed as many Hezbollah members.
Did that end up discouraging and dispiriting the Hezbollah, the Shia population?
That's where strategically failed.
So it doesn't, if you strike a blow, and the consequence of that blow is it hardens the resistance of people and makes them more incited, more motivated to kick your ass. You know what? it wasn't a good idea.
Yeah.
My old boss at State Department, who was a retired Marine colonel, he always had this saying. He goes, if it feels really good, it's probably wrong. And, if you feel really good about it, oh man, we did that. But it didn't turn out advancing the security interests of Israel. And that's where you got to get back to ask Israel, why all the killing? If you're going to use violence, then the purpose for violence, at least in my world, and I'm not talking my former CIO, I'm talking my world as a firearms instructor. Absolutely the only time you use violence is when you don't have a route of escape, you can't walk away, and you're facing life and death. And that the only, quote, success out of that is you stop the threat and you survive. Now, after that, you may face lawsuits. You may be sued civilly. So that doesn't mean it's not going to solve your problems, but at least the purpose there is to save your life. But what Israel has done with these attacks is spread the anger and actually united populations against it, not for it.
Yeah.
And,
exactly.
I think you're even starting to see Al-Jalani have some second thoughts about this. And Turkey especially is like, they've heard Herzog say, once we get Iran taken care of, we're going to go get Turkey. And it's like, dude, if that's really what you believe, shut up. Don't advertise that.
Yeah. No, I think if you look at Israeli achievements, by the way, just a quick piece of news. If you can show this, Lisa, it's a quick image. If you can show this now on the screen. The U.S. sanctioned Russian-flagged Handymax tanker, Pegasus 927-6028, keeps going in and out of the U.S. blockade perimeter just out of spite. We have multiple satellite images confirming that this is not an AIS spoof.
Mm-hmm.
So they got satellite images to confirm there's a Russian tanker just going in and out of the blockade as a middle finger to the U.S.
Yeah.
If you could show that on the maps, Lisa. But yeah, on the it's so funny. Please show it, Lisa. It's hilarious. Actually, I'll show it here while she's putting it on. There you go. So you can see that it's going in and out of the blockade. Yeah. On the Israeli side, yeah, I think it's a very important point because from a military tactical perspective, incredibly successful. I look at it that way. Managed to somehow convince Trump to bomb Iran. It's a dream come true after all these decades. Invaded a massive swath of territory in Lebanon and leveling the country with limited damage to the mainland, Israeli mainland, by Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah drone warfare is striking Israeli military assets inside of Lebanon. People have forgotten about Gaza. People have forgotten about the West Bank and the settlements that are happening there. They strike Syria whenever they feel like it and have gotten rid of Assad. And, of course, strife within the Gulf. So if you look at it from just within a silo, holy shit, Israel pulled it off. Now, if you look at it from a more strategic perspective, disastrous. Yeah. The Gulf don't trust Israel anymore. Lebanon, instead of turning on Hezbollah, they're starting to turn on Israel. And now Lebanon is, Hezbollah has managed to militarily succeed against Israel. On the Iranian side, look what happened there. They struck Iran. But, and the global sentiment around Israel is worse than ever. So yeah, this is a perfect example where they've achieved tactical success, but strategically could be disastrous for the country, especially long term.
Again, that's where Clausewitz understood that, look, it's not about how much violence you can apply in a particular situation. It's that how does that violence serve your political purposes, and how does it improve your survival as a country, not just physical survival, but also your influence within the world, your influence with other nations. Does it make you a pariah, or does it make you somebody that people want to be associated with and follow? And, one of the, I would call the yet unseen consequences of Trump's visit to China last week was the, growing recognition in the global South that the as Trump says, the hottest country in the world, the most happening place where you want to be aligned with it is China, not the United States. The United States, the grandeur that is in China in terms of the imperial city, the grandeur, as you've seen in Moscow, of the Kremlin and Red Square. The United States doesn't have anything like that, nothing that can compare. And so when you're dealing with civilizations, because, the Chinese are an ancient, one of the oldest civilizations in the world. The Russians, they're at least a good solid 1,000, 1,100 years. They got the United States beat, by a wide margin. And so it is to recognize that these are countries with some profound historical memory, and they are now in a position where they're playing a more decisive role in world affairs. And remember, the United States, its power hinges upon two mythological columns, or I call them mythological. One is that the petrodollar is supreme, and everybody, if you're going to buy oil, you got to buy oil with the petrodollar. Well, that's no longer the case. You buy it in yuan and other currencies now, and that trend is increasing. It's not decreasing. Then the second factor is that with the United States reserve currency status, to encourage other people to buy the U.S., to basically take on U.S. debt, to buy U.S. Treasury bills, give the United States money so it can continue to run up its expenditures. And instead, what are countries doing? They are dumping U.S. Treasuries, as did Japan, as has China, as has India. And they're
Chinese
buying
holdings of U.S. Treasuries have fallen to their lowest level since 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, and what they're doing, they're buying gold. So they're moving out of the U.S. dollar realm. And so far, the U.S. dollar's ability to claim to be the financial leader, it hinges upon those two things. Okay, so look at those two variables. Which way are they going? Are they growing in favor of the United States or growing against the United States? I maintain the data shows it's growing against the United States on both counts. So when that's your play, and you're losing that, there's no other happy alternative out there for the United States. Whereas China has more financial options. Yes, China's got some vulnerabilities. I'm not here to pretend that everything in China is hunky dory and it's the nirvana, but they've got more options, and they've played it smart. They've diversified. The United States has always played on the assumption, China's got to have our market. They can't live without us buying their crap. Well, actually, China's finding there's plenty of market for its crap in other, in Africa and Asia, and Latin America. So it's this loss of economic hegemony that is the biggest threat to the United States. Not Iran militarily. It's the loss on the economic front that really jeopardizes.
We haven't even talked about the American debt either.
Yeah.
National debt.
Yeah.
Yep, that's pretty much it. That was the last piece of news about the Chinese. Funny enough, I wrote it down. According to Bloomberg, Chinese holdings of U.S. Treasuries have fallen over the last few years to their lowest level since 2008, since the financial crisis. So that's reality, whether you like it or not. All right, Larry.
I
go through today's news.
I suspect we'll be talking again soon.
I would guess so as well.
I think the decision is near for Trump. If he hasn't already given the order, it will be given soon. I didn't tell you. I don't think he'll do it. Even though I'm not as convinced as I was. And the post today shocked me. I still hope you're right. I sure hope you're right.
Because I just think the Gulf won't let him. I don't think.
Yeah, well, that's the one wild card. If the Saudis and Kuwaitis and Qataris say no, we're not going down that path now,
which they should.
And if they do that, then the ability of the United States to carry out these attacks is going to be extremely limited. So that may be what saves the world.
And even take it a step further and threaten retaliation. Remember, there's the report where the UAE threatened to use the yuan for oil exports instead of the dollar if they don't get a swap line from the US.
Yeah.
So they could bite. And if the Gulf countries come together and threaten financial repercussions, but then again, the Gulf still need. They feel they need. You might disagree. They feel they need American bases as deterrence against Iran because they're still scared from Iran, even if you don't believe they should be. It'll take time before build trust on both sides.
Did you see the one meme that was on X? If Trump getting off his plane, so he looks a little bit like the now deceased actor Chris Farley. Chris Farley is this sort of rotund, chubby guy out of Canada, and Trump is stumbling forward. He's got just a white T-shirt on, his belly's showing, and it says, "I went to China and all I got was this lousy T-shirt." I saw that.
Yeah.
On the other side, you got Elon on one side and Pete Hegseth on the other. And it's either Hegseth or Elon goes, "What's that smell? Someone get the diapers."
Oh, you love memes. I swear. Whenever there it is. This is it. Let me see here.
Yeah, pull that up for your audience. That's hilarious.
Do you want to make Larry happy? Give him a good meme.
Yeah.
This is him.
Yeah. Oh, hilarious. Actually, I'll give you a little bit of news. So I was at this event, and it's called Veterans and Cigars, and basically it's to help veterans who are getting out network, and really the cost, the human cost for the United States, apart from what it's cost foreign foreign families, foreigners. It's exacting a terrible cost on the soldiers. In fact, at the end of the day, we just finished, and I was in my car driving home, and one of the other gentlemen who assisted me, a guy named Tank is his name, and he looks like a human tank. He was a corpsman. He was a Navy corpsman in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he worked with the Marine Corps and saw a lot of combat. And we have a mutual friend, a kid named Jamie. Man, Jamie was just, the sweetest, humble, and he also was a Navy corpsman. And we learned driving out that he committed suicide today. And it was just, man, it was a gut punch. Because I always use Jamie as an example of the kind of just an attitude. He was a very kind, decent person. But at this event as well, there were 2 recently retired U.S. soldiers who were involved with psychological operations, information operations. And so I got talking to them, and I said, what do you think of those Iranian Lego videos? And they go, they're incredible. We should be doing something like that, but we're not. And I said, yeah, I agree with you guys. I said the Iranians should actually, those guys that are doing those videos, and there may be some women involved, they should they should have their own business where they're subcontracting to the United States government, to the Russian government, to the Chinese government. They know how to do it. They are doing the most incredibly sophisticated, powerful information operations I've ever seen. And I was involved with some at CIA. If Iran wins nothing else, man, they're winning right there on that battlefield.
The information warfare, yeah. They're very sorry for Jamie, by the way. That's
heartbreaking. It was just sickening. My friend Tank, we just left, and I told him, hey man, thanks for a great day, because he's really good at supervising these shooting events. And man, he called me up, he was crying, and he was just like, sick to his stomach. And there are so many U.S. veterans that are out there still dying for this war for wars that we did not need to fight, for wars that had an alternative. And here we're about to do the same goddamn thing again. Yeah. And the casualties, it's not the Trump kids that are going to suffer the casualties. It are the airmen, the pilots, the seamen. Fortunately, there are not that many ground troops. But when the war's over, and understand, there is that same damage being done to Iranians. This is why it's so evil. This is what
Lebanese and Israelis, Israeli troops as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Sorry to leave you on such a downer, but
no, it's I'm sorry to hear about the news.
So
yeah. A lot of journalists have been on the show that have talked about the amount of suffering, parents that have lost their kids in that school.
Yeah.
Thanks for jumping on as always. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend. Get some rest.
I'll see you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.